Matt Vogl is the executive director of the newly formed organization called the National Behavioral Health Innovation Center. I practice saying that. He is passionate about the opportunity to help support communities in Colorado and across the U.S. in building on their assets to implement innovative solutions to long-standing behavioral health challenges. Matt brings to his role extensive leadership experience in public health, replication and evaluation of evidence-based programs, and behavioral health prevention and early intervention. Please help me welcome Matt Vogl.
Thank you, Bob. Hopefully that I am not as boring as that introduction made me sound. I listened to that, I'm like, I need some more fun stuff on my resume. And in fact, just this morning I was sitting and having coffee while my 14-year-old son was eating breakfast, and he said, "Why are you all dressed up?" And I said, "Oh, I'm giving a talk up in Boulder today." And he said, "What on?" And I said, "Well, there's this place called the Sutherland Center," and I explained it to him and said, "I'm going to talk about bipolar and talk about my own experience as a person with bipolar disorder," which I'm very honest and open with him about. And he got this really concerned look on his face, and he said, "Dad, I really don't want you to do that." And he's never expressed any sort of like shame around it or anything. And so I was a little bit surprised, and so I probed a little bit with him, and I said, "So what is it that you're nervous about? Are you just worried about embarrassment, or one of your friends' parents being there?" And he said, "No, it's not bipolar. It's that you're wearing wingtips." Your typical smart-ass 14-year-old. Thank you, son, for making me feel great. But so thank you, Bob. I want to thank you, thank all of you for coming out today. I mean, it's so encouraging when you see a room packed with people like this to come out and hear talk about a topic like bipolar, which is not easy to talk about. And it's I think that everybody here obviously has some personal connection in one way or another to this disease. And so it means a lot that you would be here. I also want to recognize the incredible staff and the providers at the Sutherland Center and the foundation, and we can give them a round of applause. They're amazing. And mostly I want to just take a moment to recognize the real heroes, which are the patients at the Sutherland Center and their family members. Getting better and staying better from bipolar is often an incredibly arduous task, and their commitment to doing that is incredibly inspiring, and it gives a lot of hope in a week when I think a lot of people need it. So let's hear it for them. So as Bob said, I've worked at the University of Colorado for about 18 years in a variety of different capacities at the med school, first in Denver, and then when we moved out to Aurora and doubled the length of my commute. I was in perinatal health for a while, worked for a nurse home visiting program for first-time pregnant moms, and then I helped start the Depression Center down there, and which is a center on that campus that treats people with a primary diagnosis of depression or bipolar, and then some of the related conditions. And I worked there for about 8 years, and then left to start this new organization with a ridiculously long name, the National Behavioral Health Innovation Center, which took me about 2 months to be able to have that roll off the tongue like that. And I'll just talk a little bit, very, very briefly about that before I talk about my own story. But the NBHIC, as we like to call it, is a new organization, and the idea was, after working on the treatment side at the Depression Center for so long, realizing, and then from my own experience, realizing just how messed up this mental health system is, and I don't think I need to convince anybody in this room about that fact. And so we said, one of the problems is that we're doing things the same way that we've always been doing them, and we need a way to bring fresh new ideas, big, bold, risk-taking things into this field the way that people are doing in so many other fields that mental health needs to catch up. So we were set up to do a number of different things differently than how universities typically do things. We don't run programs. We work with organizations that do run them. So we seek a really great, strong, committed community partner in everything that we do. And we help them identify, we listen to them rather than being a typical university and coming to them and saying, oh, we know what you need and we're gonna set it up for 3 years and study it, and then I'm gonna get academic promotion and we'll publish it and then you're on your own. We said, no, we should be listening to people, listening to organizations and communities about what it is that they want and need, and then helping them discover what other people are doing nationwide and worldwide to address those issues, and then helping them make the decisions, implementing new programs, and evaluating them and figuring out how can they sustain them financially, so that they're not just these typical flash in the pan programs that are, when they're funded by grants, that disappear after the grant does. Some of the things we're working on, we're working with the Department of Defense on a national adaptation of the New Hampshire Gun Shop Project, which is a suicide prevention initiative that actually partners with gun stores in the gun community rather than treating them as adversaries. And it reframes gun suicides from a public health issue to a gun safety issue. And it's been an incredibly effective way nationally to engage the gun community, and the majority of suicides are at the hands of a firearm. And so getting them involved and committed to be able to give out suicide prevention literature in gun stores is incredibly important, especially with the military, when we know that the majority of active duty military suicides are same-day off-base gun purchases. So they can't keep a personal firearm on most bases. So people, when they're in crisis, will go and purchase the firearm and then take their own life that same day. So there's an incredible opportunity, if people are buying those guns when they're in crisis, to be able to give these soldiers some information about access to crisis lines. And so we're excited about that. We're also doing a couple of other things. We're working, we actually have 12 projects, but we're waiting for final legal approval from Disney to work with Pixar Animation Studios to build resources for parents and teachers and therapists using the movie Inside Out as a backdrop. And if you haven't seen it, it's your homework to go watch it tonight. It's wonderful. And it's really one of the greatest pop culture tools that's ever been developed for adults to talk to kids about emotions and mental health, but nobody ever built tools to help parents do that. What are the conversation starters, and how do you connect what's in the movie with real life? So we're working on that with them as well. And one more that I'd highlight, just because we're connected with the campus here in Boulder, is we said at our center, we're never going to be able to solve these problems if we continue to think that mental health is something for doctors and nurses and therapists to solve. It takes everybody. Everybody has a very concrete role to play, including other professions. And one of the places we thought would be great to start would be with business. We know that businesses take a $100 million hit every year as a result of untreated mental illness and addiction. It's the number one reason people call in sick. It's the number one reason they access short-term disability. It leads to turnover and what we call presenteeism, where people are there, but they're not really there. They're not doing any work, they're not productive. And yet, even though it's this incredible threat to businesses' bottom lines, we scan the country at all the top business schools, nobody's talking about it. And we said, that's crazy. Why aren't we getting into business schools? Why? We have an opportunity with the lead school here to turn out generations of new business leaders who understand mental health, understand the importance of it in the workplace, and what they as future CEOs can do about it. How can they create stigma-free work environments and EAP and benefit designs, encourage to get people earlier access to care, and how can they take care of people when they are in trouble and have to take time off, and help them reintegrate when they come back. So the lead school has been incredibly excited and receptive to that. So we're working with them to build out curriculum, bring in guest lectures, and develop case studies for that. So exciting stuff, and I'd be happy to tell you more about what we're doing afterwards if there's time. So this morning, I briefly want to talk about my own journey with bipolar disorder, and I really gave a lot of thought as I was writing this to how my story might have been very different had there been an organization like the Sutherland Center available to me. It's a difficult story to tell. I know Jeannie's probably heard me say it so many times she could give this talk. It's really important to tell, because I think that it's critical for us to stop pretending like this disease is something that needs to be hidden, that it's something to be ashamed of. It's not. It's just something that people get, and that's all. So it's important to tell, even though some of the details are tough to talk about and maybe tough to hear. But most importantly, it illustrates why places like Sutherland are so incredibly important. So going back, it really started for me when I look back at it. Didn't realize it at the time, but like so many people with bipolar, when I was in undergrad at Marquette University in Milwaukee, and I was having periods where all of a sudden I realized like, hey, I don't need to sleep. This is awesome. Binge drinking became a big part of it. And then there were the profound periods of depression that twice caused me to have to leave and miss a semester, which were just chalked up to by my doctor and my parents as you're just homesick. So I didn't realize it at the time, but really the real part of my story began 14 years ago when my infant son was about 6 months old. And I was in the middle of an incredibly low and painful depressive episode. And I walked into Gander Mountain Sporting Goods store and purchased a .357 snub-nose revolver with the intent of killing myself that week. I did not join the NRA. You can laugh, it's okay. Sorry, that was a poorly timed thing. I forget sometimes that I'm used to this and other people aren't. My depression had started several years prior to that, and as depression often does, it starts out slowly, and so you don't even realize that it's happening. Like many people with depression, I just chalked it up initially to just having some bad days or some bad periods, or I'm just in a tough time in life, or maybe this is just how it is. I didn't really even remember what baseline looked like anymore. So I did what a lot of people do when they start to develop depression, and I just ignored it, especially a lot of us men. I would work through it and just stay busy, and I'd drink a lot, and it worked, and it would go away, and eventually it would come back. And again, I would ignore it and will it away and drink it away, and it would go away, and then it would come back. And every time it came back a little bit stronger, a little bit deeper, and a little bit darker. And my ability to will it away and really control it had just disappeared. And it went on like that actually for several years, and I didn't realize how bad it was even getting. And that's how depression is. Anybody who's experienced it, either yourselves or a family member, knows that it's slow and gradual. It's kind of like when the brakes go on your car and you don't realize it until like you borrow somebody else's car, and then you go back to yours and like, oh my God, I can't stop. And you don't know because it's gradual, and it makes it incredibly hard to identify and really realize that you're having a problem. And because of the stigma, people outside of your own family, or sometimes even with your own family, are reluctant to say anything, and so they just stand by and watch it happen. I was withdrawing, I was seeing my friends less and less, I was spending a lot more time at home alone, I was angry, I developed a temper that I had never had before, road rage and things that are totally out of character for me, and I couldn't fall asleep at night, and when I did fall asleep, I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. And my marriage and my career were rapidly going down the tubes as things became unraveled. So as the depression progressed, my problems started to feel insurmountable, and all the bad stuff in my life just got magnified and came into focus, and all the good stuff became blurred. I started to feel horrible about myself. My self-esteem completely tanked. I thought I had all these incredible problems in my life, and I deeply, deeply believed that most of them were my fault. I was with a friend one night and finally had the guts to talk about it, and I asked my friend Harrison, I said, I think I might have depression. This is before I was working in the field, and I said, do you know anything about it? And if you tell your friend you think that you have cancer, their immediate response is going to be, well, why are you talking to me? Go to a hospital. But it's different with mental illness, and so instead he did what most people do, and he tried to cheer me up. And he said, just snap out of it. You got this great family, you got, a new baby, and you've got a job, like, you know, I would kill to have your life. It's perfect. You just need to like snap out of it. And he suggested that I go camping and spend some time outdoors and get fresh air. Camping. You know, imagine if we did that with other illnesses. Imagine if you told somebody, you know, oh, you've got cancer, I'm really sorry about that. You know what you need? You need fresh air. Go for a walk in the woods. And it sounds ridiculous, and yet that's exactly what we do to people with mental illness all the time. Just focus on the good stuff, and your arthritis will take care of it. Right? So I knew that I didn't need to go camping because I was already completely lost in the woods. And I was in so much pain, and the more and more I thought about what it would be like to take my own life because I had lost hope. And I didn't think that there was any other way to ease the pain. And that's what suicide is about. The intent of suicide isn't death. The intent of suicide is pain relief. And people take their lives because they're in so much pain and they believe that there's no other option for getting rid of it. And that's where I was. And the one day, hope completely disappeared, and I made the decision to do it. I went from wondering what suicide would be like to planning it. And I picked out a day, I picked out a place, I wrote a note, and I purchased the gun. But I was lucky. The day I had picked out, I had a neighbor, Lucille Leva, who had gone through suicide prevention training. She was a retired, wonderful woman who's since passed. And after I dropped off my son, I came back in home and went inside to do it. And she was working in her yard, gardening, and saw me crying and insisted that I come over and ask what was wrong. I said nothing, and she knew to persist and continued to ask. And finally, I opened up and told her everything that was going on and what I was doing. And she convinced me to trade the gun for treatment and to go and get help. Now, in any normal story, that should be the rock bottom. That should be the turning point. From then, it turns and it starts to get better. And unfortunately, that wasn't true. Because next, I had to face the hell that is our mental health system. And I quickly realized that asking for help and getting the help you need are, unfortunately, for many, many people, very vastly different things. And so in a state of crisis and depression, I tried to navigate a mental health system that was, on its best days, confusing, impossible to access, and at times it felt like it was actually designed to keep people from accessing it at all. Nobody at the insurance company would call me back. When I found a list of providers online, none of them would call me back. And when they did, I finally, started to get some calls back weeks later from at least some of them, and I heard things like many people here. We're not taking new patients, I'm sorry. Oh, we actually don't take insurance anymore, it's cash only. We have a 6-month wait list, so if you want to be on that, we can see you in 6 months. I did not have 6 months. Or that guy moved out of state, and in one case they said, oh, he actually died a year ago. We're not sure why he's still on that list. And I learned the hard way that sometimes the people that have openings for a reason. And they're not always the best providers. But I was desperate, and I didn't have the money to pay cash, and so I took help wherever I could get it. And as a result, I was misdiagnosed several times, and it was as a result of that, put on medication several times that actually hurt more than helped. And I once even had a doctor fall asleep in the middle of a session. That's great for a guy who already has bad self-esteem. I mean, I know I can be boring and drone on, but I didn't think it was that bad. And it became clear to me, and this is a really sad commentary on our state, that at the time I thought the best place to get care in this state is Denver International Airport. Go somewhere else, because the system is so damn broken here. And it went on for a year, and things began to get worse instead of getting better. And I continued to put my wife through hell. She left me. Suicide started to seem like a good idea again, and I was starting to give up. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give it one more try, and I'm going to put it all on a credit card and go to the person that had been recommended to me by Dr. Krishnek at the University of Colorado, who later became a colleague. And he had recommended a psychiatrist in the community, and I went to her and just put it on a credit card, and she diagnosed me and said, you have type 2 bipolar disorder. And that should have been the turning point. That should have been, where things started to get better. But it wasn't, because that label killed me. And I'm not kidding. If somebody had told me that I had a brain tumor at that moment, that would have been easier for me to hear. Because at least with a brain tumor, I wasn't shamed. At least with a brain tumor, I wasn't going to be fearful that at some point during it, I was going to be discriminated against. And at least with a brain tumor, I felt like I could, I would be able to face my family and friends and tell them what was going on. None of those things felt true with bipolar. I thought, depression is bad enough, but bipolar, that means I'm crazy. I'm going to be that dad that's sitting off by himself, in the bleachers at his son's baseball game and totally ostracized, and I'll bring shame to my kids. And I really struggled with that for months and months and months. My doctor, my therapist, eventually helped me see that wasn't the case, and that finding out what was wrong with me was actually a good thing, because now they finally knew how to treat me, and with good care, I was finally on the way to getting better. I was saying to some people earlier, working at the med school in this field, people always ask you, what's the latest research and what's going on? And one question I get asked a lot, and I bring this up because I'm a baseball geek, in addition to just being a regular geek. And so I was with some friends last week down in Arizona watching the Arizona Fall League, which is amateur players, and so only a true baseball nerd does this. And one of my friends who knows what I do said, so do you think they're ever going to cure bipolar? And I was actually surprised by my knee-jerk reaction. I said, I hope not. I think that would be pretty tragic in a lot of ways. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a devastating, oftentimes incredibly difficult and life-challenging disease that can have horrible consequences. But at the same time, while it's responsible for some of the worst moments in my life, it's actually responsible for some of the parts of myself that I like the most. I mean, I really think that, curing bipolar in some ways would be like curing creativity, or curing big ideas, or curing an entrepreneurial mindset, or curing high intelligence, all those things that we know that oftentimes go along with it. And I told them, a world without bipolar means a world without Russell Brand making us laugh, or without Francis Ford Coppola making us think, or without Richard Dreyfuss making us wonder why they ever made Stakeout 2. Horrible movie, great guy. If we didn't have bipolar, Ernest Hemingway might not have been a writer, he might have been something else. And while my 14-year-old wouldn't shed tears over not having to read The Old Man and the Sea, it still would have been tragic. No bipolar means no Demi Lovato music, no Catherine Zeta-Jones films, no Jackson Pollock art, and no Ted Turner to watch on CNN on election night. And certainly no Robert Munch to read at bedtime with your kids. So no, I don't want a world without bipolar, but we have to get people the care that they need so that we can harness the good parts and not worry about people dying, and not worry about people losing their marriages and their jobs and their careers and everything that matters in their life. Without adequate care, people with bipolar, as I'm sure many of you know, are twice as likely to get divorced. They're 3 times more likely to lose their job at least once in their life. Without adequate care, most concerningly of all, they are 20 times more likely to die by suicide than people without bipolar or another mental illness. In fact, 50% of all people with bipolar will make at least one suicide attempt in their lifetime. We have to change that. The difference between a person with bipolar realizing incredible, wonderful potential and having a great life and dying by suicide, obviously, is 2 things. It's incredibly effective, adequate treatment, and it's super support from family members and friends. And that's where Sutherland Center comes in. I was fortunate to learn about this center just a couple of years ago, and the more I learned about it, the more blown away I was. And here's this incredible, one-of-a-kind center, the only one of its kind in Colorado, and one of just a handful in the nation that has this comprehensive approach just to focusing on bipolar and giving people treatment, medication, therapy, and doing education and support for family members, which is so critical. When you think about it, a person, even if they're doing therapy once a week, that's still just an hour a week. And what happens in the rest of that week at work and at home has as much of an impact on them, or can have as much of an impact as the therapy itself. So having a supportive, understanding family and a base to go back to is absolutely critical if somebody is going to get better and stay better. And these guys, they focus just on bipolar, as I said. They diagnose and they treat. And they deliver evidence-based therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy and family-focused therapy. I was talking about family focus therapy with someone just before the breakfast started, and FFT the data on it is unbelievable. It's one of the most effective therapeutic interventions for any disease that's ever been developed. Incredibly effective for bipolar, and engages the entire family in the process of supporting and understanding a person with bipolar. And yet, in most cities in the country, you can't find anybody that delivers it. It's been studied in a few places, and there's a couple of places, but unless you're fortunate to live in just a handful of cities, you can't get access to this. They do it at Sutherland Center. And not only that, they do it for low or reduced cost or free, so that anybody who needs it can access it. They have this biannual 8-week seminar to educate patients, families, and friends about all things bipolar, including therapy, medications, lifestyle choices, sleep, and what people can do to prevent relapses and manage them. And the real kicker, like I said, is that they open it to everybody. They said, we can't be one of those practices, and I worked for one, where it's only available to the people who have incredible financial means. And that's incredibly important, to be able to level the playing field like that. So they have a sliding fee scale and will offer reduced cost or no cost care if that's what it takes. Since they opened 15 years ago, they've given care to over 1,900 people, and many of them would never have been able to afford any care, much less first-class care like they get at Sutherland. There's nothing like this place anywhere in Colorado, and I have spent so much time wondering, especially as I put this talk together, what my life might have been like had something like Sutherland been around at the time. Might I have gotten through this without being divorced? Might I have gotten through this without fearing losing my job and having, years of trying to find an adequate provider? And might I have gotten through it without buying that damn gun? So we need the center, and they need you, and that's why we're here today. And so on behalf of everybody with bipolar disorder, I am imploring you to reward their incredible generosity with your incredible generosity, and do anything you can to support this center. Any gift, whether it's large or small, helps them in their mission to be able to continue to deliver this care and education, and to do it in a way that is accessible for everybody who needs it. So thank you, Sutherland, and thank all of you for coming out this morning.